지금 당부들 온라인에 했어.
좀 되는 아니 미리 아이디 되는 제 아니 디 파스포트 찍도 어디 308-367 찍도 어디 님 거를 왜 보내랬다.
라이브 라이브.
Sure, dangwa ID dinne mene wo de nem shawr de digital passport ko lamna anti passport de nem shawr.
그리고 다행이다.
That is all.
Oh, yeah.
자, 고생 계시라. 고든 중에
Record chado. Pesa.
발전해도.
반den난데 웰컴 투 인코멘.
Loso kanela di sarida.
So Soji Chair will start today's teaching now. So I would like to request you everyone kindly switch off your audio mic so that we can get free from the vibrations and the echoes. So Geshe-la, Tashidile, and welcome. And I welcome you all the participants here for the second day's teaching. As usual, we'll start today's teaching with a set of setting up of proper motivation, and end today's teaching with the end dedication prayer after the Geshe-la's teaching is over. So for generating proper motivation, we will start with a couple of salutations and going for refuge and generating bodhicitta in Tibetan. So kindly take out your handout which I have circulated to you. So we'll slowly read the salutation prayers along with the seeking refuge and generating bodhicitta in Tibetan. Gangi tukzi nyersune tawa tamje pangbe chir dambe chuni tunde ba godam de la chaza lo. Dongyi nyingji sundu jubela chejer seje ganjin tendre gun chana bemo tende yamzo la sowa depso shende lundrup sho. Sangye chedon soki sonam la janju bardo
La janju bado dane yozo je dage jinzo gibi chonam gi dola benje sanje duwar sho.
Sangye chedon soki chonam la
Soji chonam la janju bado dane yozo je dage jinzo gibi chonam gi dola benje sanje duwar sho.
Sangye chedon
Chedan zoji chonam la janju bado dane yozo je dage jinzo gibi chonam gi dola benje sanje duwar sho.
Wo Toji Geshe-la, now please take over.
Oh, yeah. So I would like to express my greetings to all the people who are here, and also, people who will listen in the later or listening from streaming. And this is our second gathering to read the historical Buddha's first teaching, the Four Noble Truths. And before I start to read the part, from the part where we finished, before I do that, I would like to share some of the general points which might be useful and helpful to all the people who are relatively new, and also people who have been, following the teachings of the Buddha since they remember their lives. So we started today, as well as our previous gathering, we started Kandinla, leading those verses. And Kandinla said, setting the motivation. And that is really something simple, yet it is very, very useful and helpful to do, not only during this kind of gathering, or not only while we are doing some spiritual activities, but in fact, every day morning when we woke up, when we open our eyes, just spend few minutes really to set our positive intention, positive motivation, that how we're going to spend the day. Either we are going to engage in routine activities, making a cup of tea, baking bread, eating muesli, or in the winter, having some hot porridge, or in Tibetan tupa, whatever. And then, to start the day's activities, going to office, raising children, having some small family businesses, or going to farm, whatever our activities that we are going to engage in the morning when we wake up, setting a positive motivation or intention is something very, very useful and helpful to really habituate to have a positive intention in the morning. It doesn't need to be a follower of a spiritual traditions, doesn't need to be very scholar and very well educated or like that. We all, educated or uneducated, the believer or non-believer, people from age 10, 12, 13 onward, we all are able to set a positive motivation or intention in the morning. We all have the capability to set a positive motivation, how we're going to spend that day. For example, today, 13th of December, Sunday, 13th of December, 2020, I'm going to spend my day minimum intentionally, deliberately, not going to harm others' lives, others' possessions, others' environment. Setting that kind of intention, minimum, deliberately, intentionally, I will not going to harm to others. And then also on top of that, thinking if there are possibilities, if there are chances during the day that I can support others, no matter how small that might be, just giving a cup of tea, just showing the right direction, a person who lost his or her direction. Just that kind of simple things. And thinking, I will very, humbly and very genuinely I will help, support others. That kind of mental state, that kind of thinking, that kind of intention can be, set by anybody. Of course, young children may have a little bit difficulty, but age 15, 16 onward, everybody can do that, have the ability. And training in the Buddhist term, training ourselves, or in the general, English term, the habituating, familiarizing ourselves in that manner is something very, very useful to ourselves, to our family members, to our colleagues, to our friends, and to the community. And then during the day, every now and then, just very short moment, just 1 or 2 seconds, to reconnect to the morning intention that we set. Just few seconds. That will be enough. During the day, whether we're typing on computer, whether we are listening, message from the mobiles, from the social media, or just going for a walk, whatever we are doing, just briefly during the day, from time to time, remind ourselves, oh, this morning I set my intention, how I'm going to spend my day. That will help. That will help. Some of you may know this. Nowadays, many younger generations, particularly younger generations who are grown up in cities, they don't have that kind of opportunities. When I was a young boy living with my parents, because my parents were farmer, growing crops in a small field. And one of the farmers, the main difficulties during the, planting the whatever crops they want to grow, constantly weeds growing between the crops. And you have to, my parents have to clear the weeds again and again. And among those weeds, there's one particular weed, what is in Tibetan is called zaramba. It is a particular grass, a weed. It has so many joints, and the main, the stem stay under the ground, and every joint it has a small green shoots, green shoots, and it spreads very quickly when the conditions are met, and not easy to take out one by one. When you pick up ones, and it goes a little bit further, and when I heard my spiritual teachers talking about what just I have shared with you, morning setting the intention, and then during the day, every now and then to remind yourselves the intention that you set. When I heard that, then later on, in the earlier time when I was a young boy, not that much attention paid. Many attentions were paid to see when I'm able to escape to go to cinema, Indian, those Bollywood cinema. I'm talking about the 1970s and 80s, but later on, when I grown up and start to think, start to pay attention, those good teachers' teachings, and then going to the West, then to seriously to express, to share to others, and myself try to understand, and that image of grass when I was a young boy, age 8, 9, or 10, picking up, helping my parents picking up those grasses, and that come into my head. So morning strongly setting clear, just few minutes, setting strong, clear, in positive intention. And during the day, every now and then, just few seconds, reminding ourselves, it's like those joints from that grass, and from the joint having small shoots coming up. And what's happening, what's there is underneath, the main stem is continuing. Similar to that, morning when we set a positive, strong positive intention, that is already in a subconscious level in our minds, in our conscious level. And during the day, briefly touching to that unconscious, which is in our unconscious, that positive intention, which is very, very helpful. So that will continue whole day. So, I would like to share with you, very, very useful. Then, of course, like we started saying those verses, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, shares very often, to, saying, in the morning when I woke up, first thing I recall, sometimes he says, I recall the Buddha, sometimes Nagarjuna, sometimes some verses, very powerful, inspiring verses. And that is why he is sharing to us what he does, saying we should do the same. That is really something useful to do. Then, the people like us have been following the teachings of the Buddha. Therefore, every now and then, in the morning, saying refuge, saying the lines of refuge, like the first two lines. Sanje Chedang Sogi Chongnamla, Changchu Pardo Dangne Gyapsu Che. Then saying the second two lines. Dage Jinso Jebe Chonamji, Dola Penje Sanje Dubar Sho. Just saying those lines, of course, useful, helpful, much, much better than constantly chattering on the mobiles, constantly chattering in the social media, not much meaning. Much better to say those lines, no doubt. But it is even much better if we say those lines with understanding. Our mind is, while we are saying the lines, our mind is with the meaning of those lines. And that is really something important. So while we are reading this text, the Buddha's first teaching, the meaning of the first two lines, that is the refuge, taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, will come across very well from when we understand the teachings of the Buddha, like the Four Noble Truths. Then our, taking refuge in three jewels will become really what's called meaningful, powerful, helpful, and useful. So I will, every now and then, while we are reading this text, every now and then I will remind you, that taking refuge means this, during while we are reading the text. So That is my starting point before we start the text, reading the text itself. Okay. Now the last hour meeting, we we finished the first two paragraphs, first two paragraphs from the sutra, and the first two paragraphs, the first short paragraph, first two lines are just the 2 lines are explaining when, where, whom this teaching, the Buddha taught the teachings. Buddha taught the teachings at Varanasi, Banaras. He is put Banaras to his 5 followers, and that is. And the second verse, second paragraph is, as I briefly explained our last meeting, that is saying the teachings of the Buddha will benefit to the people who have this particular lifestyle, people who have that particular lifestyle. That particular lifestyle is lifestyle which is free from 2 extremes. The extreme of indulging sense pleasure, and the extreme of neglecting our basic needs, food, shelter, medicines. Avoiding those 2 extremes and having a middle way lifestyle, people who have that kind of middle way lifestyle, these teachings will benefit. And that is what, what we read in the first 2 paragraphs. Now then coming paragraph, the text that I have sent you photocopy is on in terms of the page number, page, the 92, from the bottom, the first paragraph saying, avoiding both these extremes. So, to avoid, to free from these 2, extreme of lifestyles, then Tathagata here refers to the Buddha, fully awakened being. That's the one way to express the Buddha, in Sanskrit or in Pali. Tathagata has realized the middle path. So that the middle path. Now then, this middle path, what this middle path will do, that middle path will give us the vision, the knowledge, and that lead us calm, insight, enlightenment, nirvana. So that's what we have covered. And now this is something brief review from our previous gathering. Now then the moving to the next page, page 93, at the top of the page 93, then it says, what is that middle path? That middle path that help us to live in a middle way and give us the vision, give us the knowledge, lead us calm, and give us, lead us to have insight, have to experience enlightenment, to experience nibbana. So what is that middle path? So here nibbana or nirvana. Nibbana is in Pali written, nirvana is in Sanskrit written. It is same meaning. So now today our first main focus is that what is that middle path that lead us this, these amazing qualities that we will have, these amazing experiences that we will have. And what is that middle path? So then it says this, it is symbol, the Noble Eightfold Path, the Noble Eightfold Path. So the term here in the Buddhist term, in the Buddhist classical text, the term is used path. Path. Path exactly the same. I can see a path which leads to another monastery on this side. On this side, I can see a path which leads to another hostel, the monks' hostel. So what does that mean? That means a path, a way that leads from one end to the another end. Another way to say is means. We have so many means to get pleasant life. We have a computer. We have what you call the internet. Through these means, we are able to communicate, to fulfill our yearnings, wishes. So here, when it says, it is simple. It is simple. The Noble Eightfold Path. So there are 8 means, or 8 paths, or 8 methods that give us the vision, the knowledge, the what you call the insight, the calm, the enlightenment, nirvana. So what is those 8? Now here, 8 is now started with saying right view. First, just we will look at the list. Right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. So these are the 8 paths, or 8 noble paths. So why they are called noble? Noble. They are called noble if we live with these, either all 8 or one of them. If we live our life with these 8 things, these 8, what you call the means, we'll have a meaningful life. We'll have a peaceful life. We'll have a calm life. Eventually we'll experience nirvana, liberation. That's why it is called noble eightfold paths. Yeah? So there are 8. Now, first I want you to get a good grip. Sometimes I know, particularly Westerners, I think Easterners, I don't know. Westerners, don't like lists. As soon as we start to talk things given a list, they immediately say, oh, too much. But I think it might be to do with, because Westerners are learning many things, mainly visual, very much visual learning. And, particularly in the monastery, now it's changing a little bit. In the monastery, most things are learned by heart, not very much from visual. From the young age, memorizing, and so on and so forth. So it is very much learning through the heart, not through the visual. And but Westerners very much learning through the visual, writing, showing the images, and so on and so forth. So as soon as you, without any written list, as soon as you say those lists, they have difficulty to grasp. Anyway, so, but here there is another way to get a good grip on those long lists. So these 8, we can put into 3 groups. First 2, put in one group. First group, right view and right thought, put into one first group, and give it name wisdom. First 2. Then next three, right speech, right action, right livelihood. These three put in the second group, then call the group ethics, or morality, ethics. Then last three, which is the right mindfulness, right concentration, and right effort. Put these last three, put into the last group number 3, then we call it concentration. So now, the Noble Eightfold Path put into 3 groups. Wisdom, first 2, ethics, next 3, and then concentration, last 3. So under these 3, ethics, wisdom, ethics, concentration, capture entire, the Buddhist practice. Entire Buddhist practice collapse into these 3. What in Tibetan it's called labasum, 3 trainings, or sometimes in the classical Buddhist text to call Lakbe Labasum. Lakbe Labasum, it means sometimes it is translated higher 3 trainings. Simply why it's called Lakbe Labasum, or in English, higher 3 trainings, because these 3 trainings are also common to the non-Buddhist ancient Indian spiritual traditions. Hinduism, Jainism, Brahmanism, they all have these 3 trainings. But to have it in a different shade, Buddhist 3 trainings to differentiate from the non-Buddhist ancient Indian spiritual traditions, then the Buddhist teachers added on this particular term to say in Tibetan, Lakbe Labasum, in English, 3 higher trainings. So entire Buddhist trainings from the starting to next to experiencing full enlightenment, all the processes, training, under these 3 categories. Wisdom, ethics, and concentration. And if we want to elaborate a little bit, then in the wisdom we can put right view, right thought. Ethics we can put right action, right speech, right livelihood, and concentration, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Then it will become 8. But if we again elaborate it a little bit further, then we can have 37 aspects of the path to enlightenment, Changchok Sudun in Tibetan. So there are many different ways to look at. And so that is something useful to remember that. Now, what is here, for us, what is important, particularly the lay people who have family commitments, work commitments, social commitments, job, to those people, sometimes when we say, what you call the Buddhist training is wisdom. In the Buddhist training, you have to train to have wisdom. You have to train to have ethics. You have to train to have concentration. Immediately, we may feel that is too much. We may feel bogged down in English, sometimes they use. Immediately feel very too much, commitment. And that is, a little bit misleading. All these 3 trainings, wisdom, ethics, and concentration, can be practiced in the lay life. In the lay life. Of course, in the monastic life, I'm not sure these days, but in the traditionally, monastic lives are more simpler, less commitments, and therefore have a more time, more energies to do these things. But these days, monks and nuns have become busier and busier. Some cases have a more responsibilities and commitments than the lay lives. So anyway, but what I'm saying is, don't right at the beginning, don't think, oh, this is only to the monastic people. No, lay people can practice wisdom, ethics, and concentration, no doubt. Therefore, not to be discouraged when we talk about these things, which is important. Okay. Now, what are these 8 noble eightfold paths? One by one. Today we just introduce one by one. I will talk in the connection to out of the 4 noble truths, last noble truth of the path. There we will talk all the details. What is right? What is right? What's called the right view? What is right thought? And one by one, we are going to look at more detail when we reach the sutra, talking about what's called the 4th noble truth. So today, just I want to introduce you these noble eightfold paths. And noble eightfold path can be look at into these 3 trainings, and just to do that. Now then, here the sutra continues this. This says right concentration. This is the middle path. So this is the middle path realized by the Tathagata or by the Buddha. So historical Buddha, Gautama, when he was searching the path to be free from cyclic existence, to be free from samsara in the sense free from attachment, aversion, and ignorance, 3 poisons, and the actions or the karma are committed out of those 3 poisons. When we talk about samsara, it is mainly talking about we are under the thumb, under the thumb, which I like that expression in English, under the thumb, or under the power of these 2. Affliction in the sense, in the summary, attachment, aversion, and ignorance, and our actions of the body, speech, and mind, actions of the body, speech, and mind, which are motivated by these 3 poisons. And these actions are called karma in Sanskrit. So we are very much in the circle, one after another, in the circle of these 2, affliction and karma. And that is roughly one of the meaning of samsara. So when the historical Buddha saw that, people are going through birth, aging, sickness, and death without hardly anything they can say when they want to be born, when they want to get sick, whether they want to get aging or not, when they want to die. we don't have any any power to make the decisions. Although we all try very hard, not to get sickness, take lots of medicines, lots of what you call the food supplements, particularly in the West. When I was in the West, I teach a lot to my friends, because in the West, I mean, nowadays it's slowly spreading even in India, those middle class families. In the West, if you go to family house, in their kitchen have a cupboards to put all the things, and most of them, at least when you open a cupboard, at least one shelf is full of food supplements. Vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin C, vitamin D, all the things are there. But still, they get flu. Still, they get all sorts of things. So we try very much, and that is right. There's nothing to try, but still, we don't have that much, as long as this body which is, made by all these things, will get sick, will die, will get aging. While I was in London for 20-something years, those high street, those shops, they will change by, sometimes by months and quite often by years. New shops occur. So last few years in London High Street, like Oxford Street, Regent Street, Tottenham Court Road, all those, what you will see every now and then Botox shop. So mainly the ladies, but also these days men, just go and get Botox, not to show their wrinkles. So we can try to have not show our aging, but reality aging is taking place every second, isn't it? So what I'm talking about here is the historical Buddha, when historically it is said, I think it is true, one day when he get out of his palace or the compound where everything is perfect, everything is going okay, when he got out, then he saw the real world. He saw the aging, sickness, and death. So he, after seeing that, he seek what is the answer, not to go through those. And this is what here it says. That is the middle path realized by the Tathagatas. Tathagata, or the Buddha, realized that middle path to be free from those things. And that then it continues what we saw earlier, which gives vision, which gives knowledge, which leads to calm, to insight, to enlightenment, to nirvana. So, in other words, Noble Eightfold Path, if we really bring them within ourselves, if we live with these Noble Eightfold Path, then, it will give us calm, peace, eventually enlightenment. That means free from, that under the power of afflictions and negative karma. Therefore, there won't be sickness, aging, and death. So that is what here talking about. So that is really something important to remember. So up to here is what we have seen. We have seen the specific background, the background where the teaching is taught, to whom it is taught. And then we have seen his teaching is taught to people who have a particular lifestyles. and what is taught, and after what this will give, what that will give us. So that is really the in the what you call the classical Indian writings, classical Indian writings, and same as these days, when you go to universities and you write your, BA, essays or MA, the dissertations or PhD, the thesis, then you have to write the summary to submit your thesis, to say, this is what I'm going to write. Then who is going to make the decision, and they will read your summary. Then if they say, okay, then you write the long, 100,000 words if you're going to do PhD. So similar to that. And this up to here is really the giving the background and the summary of the Four Noble Truths. Mm-hmm. Now the main body of the text starts from this next paragraph which says, the noble truth of suffering. So that is really, starting the main body of the text. Mm-hmm. Now, here what we'll see, repeating the text, repeating the things in 3 times. Slightly different here and there, but in the main sort of structure, we may say, oh, it is repeating again and again. But then if we look at more detail, then we'll say, okay, there's some difference. So I want to give you this first before we read. When Buddha taught his teachings, these Four Noble Truths, to his follower, those earlier his 5 friends, he taught Four Noble Truths, this sutra, what in Tibetan called Len Sumdang Namdang Chungni, 3 round, and the 12 sort of repeated Namdang Chungni, 3 round, 12 repeated. So what we will see 3 things first. We'll see that each noble truth Buddha taught 3 times. Each noble truth. Think about the first noble truth. That is noble truth of dukkha, suffering. Now this English word suffering, sometimes it leads what you call the difficulties, because in English, suffering may not have deeper connotation, deeper meaning, as in Sanskrit term dukkha, or in Tibetan term dungel. Because the term the suffering, pain, dissatisfaction, challenges, they may not carry the same deep connotation as in Sanskrit term dukkha. Therefore, many great translators in the past and also the present time, they don't translate this term. They just leave it as in Sanskrit, the first noble truth of dukkha. They don't say noble truth of suffering, but some do. And what I'm doing here is I'm just, to let you know when terms noble truth of suffering, when you heard that term right at the beginning, to try to understand, this suffering is not just suffering what we normally talk about, the suffering of what's called hot sun, suffering of cold winter. These are also suffering, but in the Buddhist term, in the first noble truth of suffering, it has a very, very, what's called a deep meaning, deep connotation of suffering. It captures all sorts of difficulties. Some of the difficulties we ordinary people do not see as difficulties. We may see them as something desirable instead of undesirable. And some of those sufferings that which is under this noble truth of suffering, we ordinary people even don't think about, we don't know, let alone to see, to understand as a suffering. So therefore, it is important when you hear the first noble truth is noble truth of suffering in an English term, then right at the beginning, okay, it has a deeper meaning than what we normally talk about suffering. So that is something important. Here in this translator, he put it dukkha in the bracket, dukkha. So when the first noble truth is taught, Buddha taught the first noble truth in 3 rounds, in 3 times. First, he just simply to say there is a suffering, simply to raise the awareness of existence of suffering. There's a suffering. And then have little bit in a list of suffering. When you say there's a suffering, what kind of sufferings are there? And that's in the first round. In the second round, what Buddha said, that suffering should be understood, must be understood, should be understood. And that is in the second round. And the third round, Buddha said, once you have fully understood the suffering, then work is done, job is done. You don't need to, go again and find out new sufferings within you, around you. Once you fully understood suffering, then that is the end. You don't need to go again. It has a further meaning which will come later. So the first noble truth Buddha taught in 3 rounds in that fashion, saying there's a suffering. Suffering should be fully understood. Once you fully understood, then that is, job is done. So that is, and in the second, with regard to the second noble truth, again, Buddha taught in 3 rounds. But again, 3 rounds in the connect with regard to the second noble truth, again, slightly different, but taught in a 3 rounds. And the same as third noble truth, and the same as the fourth noble truth. Each noble truth, Buddha taught in 3 rounds. So therefore there are 12. So 12 rounds, 12, whatever term you call, 3 rounds with the 12 aspects. There are different ways to say in English. Okay. So that is really something important to remember. Now we are looking at the text itself. We're reading page 93 from the top, first second paragraph, saying that the noble truth of suffering, dukkha, is this. Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, sickness is suffering, death is suffering, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair are suffering. Association with the unpleasant is suffering. Disassociation from the pleasant is suffering. Not to get what wants is suffering. In Brave, the 5 aggregates of attachment are suffering. So here, the first round, out of the 3 rounds, with regard to the first noble truth, that paragraph is, the first round. What Buddha did in here, simply give us list of suffering that exist within us. List of suffering. Some are physical, some are mental. Some are very much, more or less, our existence itself. Our existence itself. So look at the first 4. It says birth. Birth celebration is wrong. Birthday celebration, and spend lots of money to celebrate. But the Buddha said it is suffering. It is suffering in the sense, particularly according to the Buddhist teachings, it starts 1 round of suffering, because there were many lives in the past, there will be many lives in the future. The moment we're born, or the moment we conceived in our mother's womb, 1 round started until that body, that life ceases, either 120, 30 years later, or soon after to be born, or in the middle age. So therefore, it is suffering in the sense, the causes to be born, either in a human or non-human, the causes are not pure causes. Causes, to be born as a human or whatever. I'm not talking about only those parents, what's called the sperm and egg. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about actual, according to the Buddhist teachings, the main causes to be reborn again and again are the afflictions and the karma. And these are not pure, not perfect, imperfect. So result shouldn't be perfect. If the causes are imperfect, result must be imperfect. So birth is counted as a suffering because of that. And also, although I know 1 or 2 maternity nurses back in London, we had lots of chats with that. And when the children are in the mother's womb, in that water, in that bubble water, they have lots of the joy as well as lots of difficulties. So even before we come to be born, soon after in mother's womb, the difficulty started, let alone after we grown up. Isn't it? Birth, sickness, we know is painful. Nowadays, since March 27th, I have been only once outside this monastery because of the COVID-19. Last year, 2019, most of my time I spent outside the monastery, going to seminars, going to meetings, going to some, the teachings from His Holiness. jet setting everywhere. But now this year, just so that is due to the sickness. So sickness is painful. We all know that. But sickness, aging, as I briefly touch on, particularly, when we start to experience actual aging, like me now, over 60, I can experience, I can see, many things that I used to do quite easily, and I enjoy doing them. Now I can't do that much, and even sometimes I don't enjoy. I will tell you a recent story, that due to aging. When I was, as I told earlier when I told you, when I was young naughty monk, I enjoy very much going to watch Bollywood, cinemas, and lots of sacrifice, lots of concerns, but regardless of all those concerns, sacrifices, just still go to watch, But nowadays, listening, hearing Bollywood, singing, starting to annoying me. Recently, in the Sarah Monastery now, there are many Indian families sounded. When I was a young boy, just after the Sarah Monastery, completely jungle. Now there are, lots of Indian farmers and well-established Indian community, which is nice. So when was that? I think a few days ago, quite late evening, very loud, night, singing Indian movies as, songs. And I felt a little bit annoyed. And that annoyment is due to my aging. If I were in my young age, I may enjoy instead of annoying. So that is and also physically many things so aging, and of course death. So these are suffering. And here talking about, the sorrow, lamentation, these are mental suffering, lamentation, pain, grief. Grief is something very, very painful, mental, difficulties, grief, despair, So these are mental, which we ordinary people also able to see as a mental difficulties. Then saying that association with the unpleasant is suffering. It is quite interesting, that certain things initially we may feel pleasurable, pleasant, but when we spend time with it or with them, either the thing or people, more we spend our time. Not saying all the people, but initially there's a pleasantness, there is a joy, but when you start to spend more and more time, start to feel irritation. That's why many in the West, many couples, they're separate, eventually inseparable, even as minute, but after a few months, few years, separate. So there are these sort of things, and it, saying disassociation from the pleasant, not getting, what we see as a pleasurable, not having them is pain, isn't it? My late mother used to say this, that in Tibetan I will say this, that means if you have things, there is a suffering because of having it. If you don't have it, there's also suffering because not having it. So that is really very, very good teaching I found. I noticed that while growing up, and if you don't have, you have some problems because you don't have that. For example, if you don't have money, you have a problem. You don't get what you want. But you have a money, you have a problem. How to invest them? Whom you should keep? Which bank is good? And you have a different kind of suffering. Where to invest? And eventually, even if you think you invested in the most secure insurance company or banking, that bank may go bankrupt. Then you have to try to get your deposit. So there are lots of unpleasantness. So these are the mental, changing. So Buddha talked about this. Association with unpleasant is suffering. Disassociation from the pleasant is also suffering. Not to get what you want is suffering. Now this last one is very important. When he says, in brave, the 5 aggregates of attachment are suffering. So that half line is very, very important statement to understand what is suffering. The previous list, when we discuss, when we read, we will understand. Oh yeah, these are suffering. I have experienced that. We immediately understand. Some may take a little bit time. Others, from our own experiences or seeing the other people, we will understand, oh yeah, these are sufferings, like aging, sickness, death, or not getting what you want, or getting what you don't want. We all know those are the sufferings. But the last line, when Buddha gives a summary, when he says, in brave, the 5 aggregates of attachment are suffering. So first I want to give my summary from meaning of this line. What does that mean? It means what Buddha is saying. In fact, our existence itself is suffering. Our existence itself is suffering. I usually talk to my friends in the West to say the package that what we have here as a line, we cherish, we look after, we feed, we wash, we bathe, we clothe, we do all sorts of things, what we call line. This package itself is suffering. In this package, mind and body package, there isn't anything which is not suffering. And that is very, very serious. And that is what here Buddha used, saying the 5 aggregates. That is Buddhist term. In Tibetan, Pungpo Nga. Here the term is used aggregates. Some translator use slightly different terms. Instead of aggregates, some translator will use 5 heaps. Heaps. In Tibetan, Pungpo. Pungpo has a meaning of many things put together. Many things put together. So in here, what you have, 5 things put together, first of all. 5 things put together. And each those 5 also, due to the many things put together. Therefore, in Tibetan, Pungpo Nga, 5 aggregates, 5 heaps. So what are those 5 aggregates, which we will also maybe, I don't know, yeah, not here. What are those 5 aggregates that we have? In certain extents, if I use this term, the building blocks of our life from the Buddhist point of view, and particularly from the Buddhist point of view, the building blocks of our life are these 5 things, 5 aggregates. Like the building blocks of the atoms, the most smallest atom, though sometimes they're called 16 or quarks or something, they have different countings. Similar to that, the building blocks of our life, this existence, are these 5 aggregates. That is form aggregates, feeling aggregates, disagreement, not disagreement. I want to look at, because sometimes I get those terms wrong. Okay. Discrimination aggregate. Third is discrimination aggregates. Dushiki Pungbo. Third. And fourth aggregate is compositional aggregate. Dujit compositional aggregate. And fifth aggregate is consciousness aggregate. So form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factor, and consciousness. These are the 5 aggregates. So these are the building blocks of our life, our existence. Out of these 5, first one is physical body. Remaining 4, majority are mental states, such as feeling, such as discrimination, such as number 5, which is consciousness. Number 4, they are in a certain philosophical explanation. There are certain things which are not consciousnesses, but we will not go that detail. So these are the 5. But each of them, like for example, form aggregates that we have, itself is result of many things put together. And particularly these days, the modern, what you call those when they study medicines, when they study, what you call the physical body, there are so many things put together. Then this body functions, existence of this body, functioning of this body. So therefore, it is called form aggregates in the sense many things put together, then this physical body come into existence. And from the Buddhist point of view, not only those physical, what you call the molecules, DNA, or all those, the other things, but also there is a, karmic causes. So all this put together, then there's this. So therefore, the aggregates, the term aggregates is mainly referring to because of their nature. And it is also the same, the remaining 4 aggregates, like the feeling. When we talk about a feeling, it is not just a thing. It is the process of experiencing pain, experiencing pleasure, experiencing so many other things. That's why feeling. The first moment to the second moment to the third moment. So many things put together, then we can say feeling. So therefore it's called aggregates, feeling aggregates. Same as discrimination, same as conversational factors, same as consciousness. So when Buddha said, in brief, the 5 aggregates of attachment are suffering. This mental, what you call the combination of mental, existence. Although it is amazing life, no doubt, we can enjoy so many things based on this mind and body, no doubt. It is not denying existence of pleasure, existence of happiness. His Holiness says in quite often, when the Buddha, talk a lot about suffering, he's not just scaremongering. You know the word meaning of scaremongering. He's not just scaremongering, or he's not just very pessimistic. Some people, I have a little bit that kind of characteristic, everything become very negative. That's one of my characteristics. And, Buddha is not like that. Why Buddha constantly remind us the nature of these things? The reason is there is a possibility. There's a possibility to come out from this kind of existence. So raising awareness, the suffering, dukkha exists. Dukkha, existence of dukkha is in many different layers. Reminding us, teaching us, the main reason is not causing us to scare, not causing us to feel, what you call the pessimistic life. The main reason is, okay, that is the nature of present existence, but there is a possibility to come out from this kind of existence. And that's the reason why dukkha is taught at his first teaching. He can teach so many joyful things. He can talk so many joyful, blissful things. But what he taught to his first teaching to his followers, there's a dukkha. And that dukkha should be understood. Why? If we understand the dukkha, and then we will search the solution. As a human beings, the nature of our characteristic is when we see there's a challenge in front of us, we try to overcome. We try to search solution to overcome from the challenges. That's human nature. Okay, we'll leave it here. Now is near to 5, just 8 minutes.
Hello.
Oh yeah.
Tujiche Geshe-la.
Tujiche.
For your precious and wonderful teaching, and we hope to see or get your audience very soon. And we will end today's teaching with a small dedication prayer.
Yeah.
We will just say the dedication prayer. Gangri Rawe Kure Shinkam Der Pendan Dewa
Pendant de wa malu juwe shinde zaman yazo ye shabe shide badu tenyu
Gambel Pawo Chidar Kemba Dan Kundu Sambo
Chidara jamba dang kundo sambo de yang de shin de da kunje jezo da lo shirge wa de da tamje rabdo
Dusum Shekbe Gyawa Tamje Ki
Kyewa tamje de ngo ga la chodo nga ba de tagi gewe sawa de wa sambo je je rabdo ngo ra yi
Malam Lokbe Gyawa Tembala
Kambala kuwe na jo su jen su me de samjo nge be ju wa ma le ba cho zo de be ze ne ju yu ji
Thank you so much and we'll see you soon.